Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We will begin here shortly as everyone gets set up into the participant attendee channel. All right, Clint, I think we're ready to get started. So why don't you get this show into the road?
Thank you, Joe. Welcome everyone to the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Multifamily Housing Program NOFA workshop. Today's presenters include Joe Harney, the DR Multifamily Housing Branch Manager, Clint Whited, Program Consultant, Lori Baker, Program Consultant, Gabriela Navarro, HCD Asset Management and Compliance Specialist. We are joined today by other HCD program staff in the Disaster Recovery Multifamily Housing Program, including Emily Burgos, Maria Rouse, Chris Chen, Jamie Knack, Nien Nguyen, and Maggie Silver. Housekeeping today, all attendees will be muted for the duration of the webinar. You may submit questions through the Q&A box. You may also submit questions to our email address, which is dr-mhp@hcd.ca.gov. We will compile answers to all questions in a frequently asked questions FAQ document to be posted on our website after the webinar. We will post a recording of this webinar to our webpage at a later date. Any capitalized terms that appear on the slides are defined in the program policies and procedures. Our webpage URL is shown on screen. I'll kick it over to you, Joe, for the overview.
Perfect. Thank you, Clint. Welcome, everyone. We are here talking about our disaster recovery multifamily housing program overview. So as you may be aware, the DR MHP program is authorized pursuant to the state of California's CDBG-DR action plan for the 2023-2024 disasters that was approved by HUD on June 2nd, 2025 to address presidentially declared flood disaster DR 4699, which occurred between February and July of 2023, and the DR 4758 disasters occurring in January 2024. The objective of the program is to provide low interest loans for new construction of affordable multifamily rental housing. This NOFA is going to contain $137.8 million available in 4 separate geographical set-aside regions. The application deadline will be November 21st, 2025 at 4 p.m. And for any further questions, as has been noted before, please contact us through our dr-mhp@hcd.ca.gov inbox. So this is our general population workshop. We will be doing tomorrow a workshop that is specifically geared towards tribal entities on tribal land. But this workshop is for all eligible applicants seeking to build on non-Native American land that are in the eligible disaster impacted counties. If your organization is a tribal entity seeking to build off Native American land, the following information is still applicable to your goals. If your organization is seeking to build on Native American lands, please join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for that tribal entity webinar. So the next area we're going to talk about the most impacted and distressed areas and the geographical set-asides. Next slide, please. So for the 2 disasters, 4699 and 4758, consists of these 6 counties: San Benito, Tuolumne, Tulare, San Diego, Monterey, and Santa Cruz counties. Now, as part of the action plan and the available unmet needs data presented by HUD and FEMA, we have organized this funding availability into 4 geographic set-asides. The first being the San Benito, Tuolumne, and Tulare counties received a allocation of $20.6 million. San Diego County has $27.5 million. Monterey County, $41.3 million. And Santa Cruz County, the largest allocation at $48.2, totaling $137.8 million available through this NOFA. Now, with the geographical set-asides, applicants will compete for funds regionally based on the location of their projects. These geographic set-asides will only be funded to the extent that eligible applications exist, meeting the threshold requirements, including minimum point scoring. If the department receives fewer eligible applications than funding available in a specific geographic set-aside, any unawarded funds may be used to fund remaining eligible applications in other regions. Now, hazard mitigation is pursuant to the Federal Registrar Notice and California Government Code. Applications must describe how hazard mitigation measures will be incorporated into the project to reduce the impacts of recurring natural disasters. DR MHP projects are required to incorporate these mitigation measures and features into the design of the multifamily units pursuant to Section 3.1 of our DR MHP policy. And here to talk about the program requirements in more detail is Clint Whited.
Thank you, Joe. We'll begin with the description of eligible sponsor applicant. The following entities may apply for the NOFA: for-profit developers, nonprofit developers, and tribal entities. Entities and individuals involved in the proposed project must not be listed on the government-wide exclusion list at the System for Award Management website, sam.gov. Upon receipt of the DR MHP award, the applicant or co-applicants will both individually and collectively be referred to as the sponsor in the department's legal documents relative to the award of a loan. Eligible projects under the NOFA include new construction of multifamily rental housing only. Multifamily rental housing also includes scattered site projects. Eligible projects must be located in a geographical set-aside area as previously described by Joe on slide 7. Now we'll discuss the threshold application requirements. Proposed projects must fulfill all of the requirements on the following slides. Any application which does not meet threshold will be ineligible to receive a CDBG-DR MHP award. All requirements on the following slides apply for proposed projects not located on Native American land and may differ should the proposed project be on Native American land. Threshold requirements, Part 1. At the time of the application, the sponsor shall demonstrate site control in accordance with UMR Section 8303. Must not have closed on construction financing or funding or already started construction. The application must demonstrate the ability to start construction within 180 calendar days of the DR MHP award. The application must have a letter providing prior notification to the local legislative body pursuant to Health and Safety Code Section 5675.7E. The application must have a letter or resolution of support for the proposed project from the local legislative body where the proposed project is located. The application must tie back to the disaster by increasing the supply of affordable housing units in a most impacted and distressed area as described back on slide 7. Additional threshold requirements: the application must have a minimum of 5 total units, including scattered site projects. The application must demonstrate that it has a minimum of 5 affordable units, or that 51% of the units must be affordable units, whichever is greater. CDBG-DR funds are limited to low and moderate income housing units. Proposed projects may have mixed income units, but CDBG-DR funds must only be applied to the affordable units for occupation by low and moderate income households. All sources of funding required to complete the project must be identified, including the status of the funds, whether they are applied for, pending a decision, you're applying for funds, or the funds are secured and fully committed to the project. The project cost must be reasonable, which we term as what a reasonable person would pay in the same or similar circumstances for the same or the similar item or service, in this case, development of a multifamily housing project, including multifamily housing units. The application must conform and demonstrate that the project will conform to the construction standards that are set forth in Section 3.1 of the DRMHP policy where applicable. The application must demonstrate that the project will comply with all applicable federal requirements set forth in Section 3.4 of the DRMHP policy. And most importantly, the application must receive a minimum point score of 88 points based on the universal scoring criteria set forth in Section 4.3 of the DRMHP policy and Section 4 of the NOFA. The project must be documented in the application to address the following affordable rent requirements and tenant income limits throughout the duration of the required affordability period. At a minimum, the following thresholds must be adhered to in all project applications. The number and type of proposed DRMHP assisted units that will be leased to tenants with an income of up to 65% of the AMI based on regulatory and program requirements. Proposed projects shall include at least 10% of the proposed DRMHP assisted units for households with income not exceeding 30% of AMI. Affordable rents will be determined using the Multifamily Tax Subsidy Project's MTSP regular income rent limits published annually by HCD for the jurisdiction where the project is located. Projects shall be restricted by a recorded regulatory agreement for a minimum affordability period of 58 years. Pursuant to Administrative Notice number 23-01, if a project has a federally originated rental assistance or operating subsidy, the project must make a one-time transition reserve fee payment at permanent loan closing in the amount of 15% of the first year's maximum subsidy amount. Now we'll move from threshold to program funding terms and limits. The Disaster Recovery Multifamily Housing Program maximum per unit loan limit. Awards of CDBG-DR funds shall not exceed the lesser of the demonstrated need for the maximum per unit loan limit in effect at the time of the application in accordance with our policy, Section 2.3.2. As shown on screen, for a 0-bedroom unit, the maximum subsidy is $211,116. For a 1-bedroom, $242,012. For a 2-bedroom, $294,295. For a 3-bedroom, $380,722, and for a 4-bedroom unit, $417,911. And to illustrate the application of the DRMHP maximum loan value, if you had a project with 101 units, of which 100 are affordable and all were subsidized by DRMHP, of which 50 are 1-bedroom, 25 are 2-bedroom, and 25 are 3-bedroom units, the table shown on this slide shows you what the multiplication of 51-bedroom units times the maximum subsidy and the total subsidy. And based on the mathematics, the total maximum DRMHP award for the project I just described could be as much as $28,976,025. Based on the above unit mix, the maximum award would be that $28.9 million based on the maximum per unit subsidy limit. However, if the demonstrated need of the project exceeds the DRMHP maximum per unit loan limit calculation that we just discussed, the DRMHP loan may be sized equal 75% of total development cost, provided that 100% of the new rental housing units are restricted as DRMHP units in accordance with our policy, Section 2.4. For For DRMHP loan limit calculations, the unit count may include the number of DRMHP assisted units within the project, including units with long-term, low-income, or occupancy restrictions imposed by HCD, the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee, or other public agencies, and restricted at no greater than 65% of area median income. Program funds shall be used for construction phase financing only and may not be held for use until permanent financing. Funding shall be provided in the form of a loan. And the eligible uses of CDBG-DR MHP funds include property acquisition costs, architectural, appraisal, engineering, environmental, legal, and other consulting costs and fees, which are directly related to planning and execution of the project and which are incurred through third-party contracts. Escrow, title insurance, recording, and other related costs, building permits and state and local fees, local development impact fees, developer fees as set forth in the Uniform Multifamily Regulation, insurance and bonding, mobilization, demolition, site prep, and site cleanup, residential construction costs, and on-site improvements that are related to the project. The ineligible uses of CDBG-DR MHP funds include any costs incurred between the date of this application and the environmental clearance or authority to use grant funds that constitute an adverse environmental impact or that limit the choice of reasonable alternatives pursuant to federal regulations. Application development costs, advances of any type, including construction, interest and financing costs, facility operating or maintenance expenses, any type of reserves, furnishings, off-site improvements, except where the improvement is contiguously adjacent to the project parcel and serves the housing, construction or any other costs related to any non-residential component of the project, and reimbursement of the sponsor's capital investment or prepaid expenses. Prohibition on the duplication of benefits. Duplication of benefits occurs when a program beneficiary receives disaster assistance from multiple sources for the same recovery purpose, and the total assistance received for that purpose is more than the total need. This includes all benefits available to a person or entity for the same recovery purpose, including cash and other resources such as insurance proceeds, grants, FEMA assistance, Small Business Administration loans, other local, state, or federal program funds, and private or nonprofit organization funds. Project applications may not contain any duplication of benefits. All activities funded with CDBG-DR dollars must undergo a duplication of benefits review and a calculation prior to project award and prior to project closeout. So we'll verify no duplication of benefits twice, once prior to award and once at closeout. Additionally, a marketing plan will be required. DRMHP applications, where applicable, must include a marketing plan pursuant to Section 2.14 of the DRMHP policy. Sponsors shall prioritize marketing to disaster-impacted households for occupancy of units. Examples of renters impacted by the disasters include renters that have lost rental units or who have been displaced due to the impacts of DR 4699, DR 4707, and DR 4758. Sponsors shall also demonstrate within the marketing plan that proposed projects will increase housing options for low-income households. The applicant must submit an appraisal and market study with their application pursuant to Section 2.7 of the DRMHP policy. The applicant must submit the tenant selection criteria and processes with their application pursuant to Section 2.8 of the DRMHP policy. And for applications that include housing with supportive services, a supportive service plan must be submitted with the application pursuant to Section 2.9 of the DRMHP policy. Scoring. Applications that pass the initial threshold review will be scored using the universal scoring criteria. In the event of tied scores, HCD shall rank the tied applications based on the tiebreaker system detailed in the universal scoring criteria. Refer to Section 4 of the NOFA for further details. Incomplete applications or others not expected to receive an award of funds due to relatively low scores may not be fully evaluated. All applications meeting all of the threshold requirements and achieving a minimum point score of 88 points in the universal scoring criteria will be considered for funding. With respect to supportive service costs, for special needs projects, the department's Notice of Omnibus Program Guideline Amendment, Supportive Service Cost Limits, Administrative Notice 24-05, dated October 7th, 2024, and as may subsequently be amended, provides operating funds to hire high-quality, skilled supportive service staff. This policy supersedes Uniform Multifamily Regulation Section 8314E and F that allowed supportive service costs as eligible operating expenses within a project's operating budget within prescribed limits. So you will follow Administrative Notice 24-05 with respect to supportive service cost limitations. The limits included in that notice, or as may subsequently be amended, will be observed. And for more on application submission and review procedures, I'm going to turn the presentation over to my colleague, Lori Baker.
Thank you, Clint. So I'll go over the application submission and review procedures. Applications must meet eligibility requirements as previously described in threshold slides upon submission. Applications that do not meet the filing deadline requirements will not be eligible for funding. Applications must be on forms provided by HCD, which cannot be altered or modified by the applicant. It is the applicant's responsibility to ensure the application is clear, complete, accurate, and timely. Excel forms must be submitted in Excel format, not in PDF format. Application materials must be submitted electronically via eSIMIS Grants Network's solicitation portal. Requirements for uploading the DR MHP application workbook and required supporting documentation, including naming conventions, are described in the DR MHP application instructions page. Applicants must upload all application materials to the solicitation portal. The disclosure of the application, information provided in the application will become a public record available for review by the public pursuant to the California Public Records Act. Any materials provided are subject to disclosure to any person making a records request under this act. HCD cautions applicants to use discretion when providing information not specifically requested, including but not limited to bank account numbers, personal phone numbers, and home addresses. Providing this information to HCD, the applicant is waiving any claim of confidentiality and consents to the disclosure of submitted material upon request. Prior awards. For applicants that receive prior awards under HCD may seek to substitute previously awarded funds, including but not limited to substitutions to increase the amount of an award, must first reject their previous award in writing prior to submitting their DR MHP application and provide a reasonable written justification that the substitution is necessary to ensure project feasibility. For projects proposing a reduction to AMI levels on the unit mix, the awardee must engage with program staff of their prior award and confirm the change does not impact project feasibility and would not cause a reduction in awarded funds pursuant to that program's requirements. Prior substitutions of prior awards. So a consultation with the department program staff is required before any substitution will be permitted. Substitutions based solely upon sponsor applicant preference or convenience of funding source will not be permitted. It is allowable for applicants that wish to retain their previous award to apply for funds available within this DR MHP NOFA, so long as the previous award is unmodified. The department will also allow previously awarded projects to lower their proposed income targets from one application to the next, so long as the total unit count remains the same. The department will restrict units to the lowest targeting across all awarded funds and will require projects awarded from a program within prioritized target populations to maintain the special population units. Increasing target population and/or restricted units is permitted. So the consultation for applications that will substitute prior applications must begin no later than October 24, 2025. So once you submit your application, if you find that there are changes, significant changes in the project application, the department will review the information provided in the application and score the application accordingly. If there is a significant departure from the application, the department may reevaluate the project score, reduce the loan or grant amount, or assign negative points to the sponsor applicant. I'll turn it back over to Clint.
Thanks, Lori. Next, we'll cover the universal scoring criteria. So our universal scoring criteria includes 6 different elements with a total possible universal point score of 117 points. We will go over each of the different sections of the universal scoring criteria individually. Proposed projects must receive at least 88 points to be considered for an award. The 6 different categories include the extent to which the project serves households at the lowest income levels with a maximum score of 30 points, state policy priorities with a maximum score of 20 points, project sponsor and property management experience with a maximum score of 20 points, project readiness with a maximum score of 27 points, infill proximity to amenities and efficient building methods has a total maximum score of 15 points, and cost containment at 5 points possible. So we'll go over scoring criteria 1, the extent to which the project serves households at the lowest income levels. So there's a maximum of 30 points in this category. Applications will be scored based on the percentage of restricted units limited to various percentages of area median income adjusted by household size. Each percent of area median income or percent of AMI category may be used only once. To receive any points in this category, at least 10% of the restricted units must be restricted to households with incomes not exceeding 30% of AMI. This is a table representing the lowest income points table. And so what you will see here is that across each column represents the percentage of area median income to which a unit is restricted. And each row represents the percent of restricted units within your unit mix in the project application workbook that are at a particular area median income level. So as an example, if 25% of, so if 50% of the units are restricted at 65% of AMI, that would result in 5 points. And so you will consult with section 4B of the NOFA and then use the unit mix table within the application workbook to determine how your unit mix scores based on the percentage of restricted units and the AMI level at which they are restricted. And those result in point values as shown on this table. So as a sample, the percentage of restricted units at each income level may be rounded to the nearest whole percentage point. So for example, if you had 29.7% of units were restricted at a particular AMI that would round up to 30% and qualify for the 30% point level. If you had 10% of your units restricted at 30% of AMI, you would earn 7.5 points. If 15% of the units were restricted at 40% of AMI, you would earn 7.5 points. If 50% of the units were restricted at 50% of AMI, you would earn 12.5 points. And if 25% of the units were restricted at 65% AMI, you would receive 3.15 points. And in this hypothetical project example, this particular unit mix would score 30.65 points and be capped at 30 points. So your application would score the maximum 30 points based on this unit mix. We do have a deeply affordable units policy, which deeply affordable units is defined as units with up to 30% AMI targeting. Those units can't be concentrated among a project's smaller units, and so it needs to be a reasonable range and dispersed among the different bedroom sizes within the development. It needs to be distributed proportionally across all of the unit sizes, or alternatively more heavily represented among the larger unit sizes. To ensure a proportional spread of deeply affordable units, at least 10% of the larger units in the project must be provided at 30% AMI as applicable. So long as the applicant meets the 10% standard project-wide, the 10% standard need not be met among all of the smaller units. So as a sample, if you had 60 total units in a project and you had the requisite number of required extremely low income units, which in this case would be 6 or 10% of the 60 unit total, you could disperse those units as 2 units among the 3-bedroom units, 2 units among the 2-bedroom units, and 2 units among the 1-bedroom units. To present scoring criteria to state policy priorities, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Lori Baker.
Thank you, Clint. So criterion 2 overview, there's a maximum of 20 points available from below the below categories. 5 points will be awarded for projects located in a high resource or highest resource area, as shown as on the TCAC HCD opportunity map. 10 points will be awarded for DR MHP units serving special needs populations, and 5 points awarded to a project that is located on public access lands. Regarding the opportunity area map, 5 points, as mentioned, will be awarded to projects located in a high resource or highest resource area map shown on the TCAC HCD opportunity area map. Once projects receiving 5 points pursuant to this criterion have been ranked and recommended for award in the amount of 50% of all program funds available in a region, remaining projects shall not receive 5 points for meeting the requirements of this criterion. Opportunity maps can be found on the link provided in the next slide, which will be available on the HCD's website. The points for serving special needs populations are as follows. There's a maximum of 10 points available. 10 points will be awarded to projects that have special need DR MHP funded special needs unit as a percentage of total units. So 25 or more percent DR MHP funded special needs units will receive 10 points. 9 points for units 16 to 24% of the units, DR MHP funded special needs units, and 8 points for 10 to 15% of the units in the project. A project with 50 total units, of which 36 are DR MHP funded units, of which 9 are DR MHP funded special needs units, would receive 9 points under this criterion. That's 9 divided by 50, total units is 18%. So I'm just clarifying that your project may have special needs units. However, we're talking about the DR MHP funded special needs units. So special needs does not include seniors or veterans unless they otherwise qualify as special needs populations as required by other statutory laws. Special needs populations is defined as one or more of the following groups who need supportive services to maintain and stabilize their housing. Individuals with disabilities, individuals at risk of homelessness, are experiencing homelessness, or are experiencing chronic homelessness. Individuals with substance use disorders, frequent users of public health or mental health services, individuals who are fleeing domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking, homeless youth, families and child welfare system for whom the absence of housing is a barrier to family reunification, individuals exiting from institutional settings or at risk of placement in an institutional setting, older adults in need of supportive services, or other specific groups with unique housing needs as determined by the department. Okay, public access lands. For projects located on excess lands, there's a minimum of 5 points, which include new construction on a site designated as excess land under Executive Order N-06-19, or any land declared surplus by a local agency. For state-owned excess land, the project must be located on a site selected under Executive Order N-06-19 to enter into a ground lease with the state to create affordable housing on excess state-owned property. For surplus land owned by the local agency, including transit agencies, land donations made in fee simple must be supported by a transfer agreement and demonstrated written conformance with the Surplus Land Act. Land donations made as a low-cost, long-term lease must be supported by written conformance with Surplus Land Act and a post-negotiation notice and proposed disposition summary. So we'll go over scoring criteria on 3, which is project sponsor applicant and property management experience. There's a maximum of 20 points for criteria number 3, and there's 3 components: development and ownership experience with a maximum of 15 points, property management experience with a maximum of 5 points, and negative points are variable. And we'll discuss these in the next few slides. So development, owner, and ownership experience, maximum 15 points. Applications will be scored based on the number of subsidized rental housing projects, including tax credit projects, that the sponsor applicant has completed and operated. Sponsor applicant may include the experience of its controlled affiliated entities or principals, but not the experience of non-management board members. Sponsor applicant may include the experience of a partner to gain experience points. The experienced partner must have a controlling interest in the project's ownership and a substantial and continued role in the project's ongoing operations. Experience among partners shall not be aggregated. Any change in ownership that reduces the sponsor applicant's role shall require prior written approval by the department. Projects that must demonstrate the following: projects for which points are required to have maintained fiscal integrity for the year in which each rental housing development's last financial statement has been prepared, positive operating cash flow from typical residential income alone, and have funded reserves in accordance with the partnership agreement in any applicable loan documents. Certification must be submitted with respect to the last full year of ownership by the sponsor applicant along with verification of the number of years that the project was owned by that sponsor applicant. To obtain points for projects previously owned, the ending date of ownership or participation must be no more than 10 years from the application deadline. So for example, 5 points will be awarded if the applicant has one or two projects in service more than 3 years, at least one of which is department regulated or utilizes low-income housing tax credits allocated by TCAC. 10 points for 3 to 4 projects in service more than 3 years, of which one has been in service for more than 5 years, and 2 are department regulated or utilizes low-income housing tax credits allocated by TCAC. And 15 points for 5 or more projects in service more than 3 years, of which one has been in service more than 5 years, and 2 are department regulated or utilizes low-income housing tax credits allocated by TCAC. Next, there we go. Okay, we're going to talk about special needs projects relating to ownership experience. So the developer shall have 3 or more years experience serving the target populations proposed to be served in the application. So for special needs projects in service, 5 points will be awarded if there's one special needs project serving the same target populations as the proposed project in service more than 3 years. 10 points for 2 to 3 special needs projects serving the same target populations as the proposed project in service more than 3 years, of which one has been in service more than 3 years and one is department regulated or utilizes low-income housing tax credits allocated by TCAC. And again, 15 points for 4 or more special needs projects, again, serving the same target populations as the proposed project in service more than 3 years, of which one is department regulated or utilizes low-income housing tax credits allocated by TCAC. So this slide covers property management company experience. There's a maximum of 5 points. To obtain points for projects previously managed, the ending date of the property management role must be no more than 10 years from the application deadline. Property management experience with a project shall not predate the project's construction completion deadline or date. So this chart shows the maximum points possible in different scenarios. So for example, 1 point will be awarded if there's one project managed over 3 years, 2 points for 2 to 4 projects managed over 3 years, of which one shall be department regulated or projects utilizing low-income housing tax credits allocated by TCAC. 3 points for 5 to 7 projects managed over 3 years, of which one shall be department regulated or utilize tax credit allocated by TCAC. 4 points for 8 to 10 projects managed over 3 years, of which 2 shall be department regulated or TCAC properties. And 5 points for 11 or more projects managed over 3 years, of which 2 shall be department regulated or utilizing low-income housing tax credits allocated by TCAC. For special needs projects, points are available as described above or as follows. 5 points for 4 or more special needs projects serving the same target populations as the proposed project in service more than 3 years, of which one shall be department regulated or a project utilizing low-income housing tax credits allocated by TCAC. Applicants with fewer than 4 active rental housing developments in service more than 3 years shall contract with a bona fide management company, which itself earns a minimum total of 5 property management experience points at the time of application. Contracting property management. So the sponsor applicant or property co-managed entity must obtain training in project operations, on-site certification training in federal fair housing law, and manager certification. Experienced property management agent or an equally experienced substitute must remain for a period of at least 3 years from the construction completion date, or for ownership transfers, 3 years from the sale or transfer date, to allow for at least one HCD monitoring visit. Experienced property manager may transfer responsibilities to the remaining general partner or property management firm following formal written approval from HCD. And I'll turn it over to Gabriella to discuss negative points.
Thank you, Lori. My name is Gabriela Navarro, and I'll be going over negative points. Per HCD's negative points policy, an application will be assessed negative points based on performance penalties assessed pursuant to the department's negative points policy, which was last amended April 3rd, 2023. If the sponsor applicant or the property management company is subject to a negative points assessment or is determined to be ineligible for funding, HCD shall notify them in writing in the initial point score letter. So here's an example of how negative points would impact scoring. So for example, if a project earns 15 points under development and ownership experience and 5 points under property management company experience, but is assessed 3 negative points, the final score for this criterion would be 17. So you have the 15 plus the 5 minus the 3. All right, if the sponsor applicant is subject to a negative points assessment, HCD will provide an opportunity to appeal a negative points assessment pursuant to the appeals process as set forth in the NOFA. Your organization may consult the Asset Management and Compliance branch at compliance verification at hcd.ca.gov to ensure your portfolio is in compliance no later than October 3rd, 2025. Now I'll be handing it back over to Lori Baker for project readiness. Thank you.
Thank you. So criterion for overview, there's a maximum points of 27. 10 points for financing commitments, 15 points for local and environmental approvals, 2 points for organizational documents. Points will be awarded to projects under each of the following rating factors as documented in the application and as indicated in the following slides. If a particular rating factor is not applicable, full points shall be awarded in that category. Financing commitments, maximum 10 points. 5 points will be awarded for evidencing enforceable funding commitments for all construction financing. It excludes tax-exempt bonds and low-income housing tax credits. However, with projects with bond financing, lender commitment of bond financing is required for these points. 5 points will be awarded for evidence of enforceable funding commitments for all permanent financing. That includes all grants, project-based rental assistance, and operating subsidies. For projects with bond financing, any applicable permanent lender commitment of bond financing is required for these points. Enforceable funding commitments is evidenced by a letter stating that the funds have been awarded to the project. The department may approve other evidence that the assistance will be reliably available. Contingencies and commitment documents based upon the receipt of an allocation of tax-exempt bonds, 4% tax credits, or 9% tax credits will not disqualify a source from being counted as committed. To receive points for deferred payment financing, grant funds, or subsidies from other department programs, these funds must be awarded prior to finalizing the preliminary point scoring of applications under the DR MHP NOFA. For land use approval, maximum of 10 points for one of the following. 10 points for obtaining all land use approvals or entitlements necessary prior to an issuance of a building permit, including any required discretionary approvals. Project sites where the planning department confirms eligibility for streamlined ministerial approval are eligible for these points. 5 points for submission of a complete application to the relevant local authorities for land use approval under a non-discretionary local approval process where the application has been neither approved nor disapproved. 1 point for a letter signed by a planner certified by the American Institute of Certified Planners indicating that, in their opinion, the project meets all the requirements for approval under a non-discretionary local approval process where an application has not been approved or disapproved by the local authorities. Next slide. Environmental approvals, maximum 5 points, pardon me. Points will be awarded for submission of local certification of California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, exemption or completion and submission of 1, a complete draft environmental assessment with source documentation, 2, a complete draft National Environmental Policy Act under NEPA, categorically excluded, subject to 58.5 review with source documentation, or 3, assigned authority to use grant funds, or AUGF, from HUD or other appropriate federal agency supported with the underlying environmental review document and source documentation. Note that the project must have all documented environmental clearances prior to the construction loan closing. Next slide. Organizational documents, maximum 2 points. If the ultimate borrowing entity, including all affiliated entities, is fully formed and all required organizational documents are submitted with the application. Next, we'll go over scoring criteria number 5, infill, proximity to amenities, and sustainable building methods. There's a maximum of 15 points. Applications will receive 5 points for each of the following: infill, development and net density, proximity to amenities, and efficient building materials. We'll cover each of these 3 in the next few slides. Infill, development, and net density, maximum 5 points. The project must meet one of the following requirements: infill site, that is 75% previously improved, or 75% adjoining parcels with urban uses, or at least 50% previously improved, and at least 50% adjoining parcels with urban uses. Net density. Developed at average residential net densities on the parcels to be developed that are greater than the densities described below. For an incorporated city with a non-metropolitan county and for a non-metropolitan county that has a micropolitan, gotta spit that word out, micropolitan area, sites allowing at least 20 units per acre. For an unincorporated area in a non-metropolitan county, not included in the above bullet, sites allowing at least 15 units per acre. For a suburban jurisdiction, sites allowing at least 25 units per acre. For a jurisdiction in a metropolitan county, sites allowing at least 45 units per acre. For a rural area, sites allowing at least 15 units per acre. Proximity to amenities, maximum 5 points. 1/3 point per site amenity point that would be awarded under TCAC regulations, Title IV, or successor regulation. Note that in TCAC regulations, this is a 15-point category. Achieving all 15 points under TCAC translates to 5 points under DR MHP. Transit points must be for a transit station or a major transit stop, and distance must be measured by a walkable route. Efficient building materials, maximum 5 points for fulfilling any combination of the following: regional planning and transportation plan, greater than 50% of land area in a transit priority area, near electrification, and total electrification. Maximum 2.5 points will be awarded if the project supports implementation of a regional planning and transportation plan that has been determined by the California Air Resources Board to achieve regional and state land use and transportation goals. Must be demonstrated by a letter or resolution executed by an officer or an equivalent representative from the Metropolitan Planning Organization, Regional Transportation Agency, Planning, or Local Transportation Commission. Regional plan, maximum 2.5 points for projects supporting a regional plan that includes policies and programs to further regional and state land use and transportation goals. Must be demonstrated by a letter or resolution executed by an officer of or an equivalent representative from the Metropolitan Planning Organization or Regional Transportation Planning Agency or Local Transportation Commission. Transit priority area, maximum 2.5 points for projects where not less than 50% of the land area is within a transit priority area. Must be demonstrated by a letter or resolution executed by an officer of or an equivalent representative from the Metropolitan Planning Organization, Regional Transportation Planning Agency, or Local Transportation Commission. Near electrification conditions, maximum 3 points for projects that achieve near electrification. 2 out of 3 of the major energy appliances, cook stoves, space heating, water heating, are electric. Projects must be wired to be electric ready, defined as having 240 volt outlets near each gas appliance. Total electrification conditions, maximum 5 points for projects that are powered entirely through electricity with no connections to natural gas infrastructure. Turn it back over to Clint.
All right, thank you, Lori. I'll be taking you all the rest of the way. Final scoring criterion number 6 is cost containment. The cost containment formula includes a maximum of 5 points. A project shall receive 1 point for each full percent of the project's eligible basis is less than the project's adjusted threshold basis limit, up to a maximum of 5 points. The percentage is calculated by dividing the project's eligible basis by the project's adjusted threshold basis limit. See section 4G of the NOFA for additional details on the calculation. Moving into tiebreakers, in the event of a tied score, the department will rank tied applications based on 3 factors, which will be implemented in sequence to break ties. The first is the lowest weighted average affordability of all residential units. The second is leverage of other funds. And the third is additional cost containment. If after review of the first factor, applications remain tied, the second factor will be calculated and applied. If after review of the second factor, the applications remain tied, the third factor will be calculated. As a note, the DR-MHP application workbook is designed to automatically calculate tiebreaker score for the project, so we highly encourage you to utilize the application workbook for that purpose. For more information, please see section 4H of the NOFA. Next, I'll cover appeals. The basis for an appeal include applicants may appeal HCD's written determination that an application is incomplete, has failed threshold review, or has otherwise been determined to provide an insufficient basis for an award. At the sole discretion of the department's written determination may include a request for clarifying and/or corrective information. No applicant shall have the right to appeal a decision of the department relating to another applicant's application. Any request to appeal the department's decision shall be reviewed for compliance with the DR-MHP policy and this NOFA. All decisions rendered shall be made by the program manager or her designee. The decision shall be final, binding, and conclusive, and shall constitute the final action of HCD. The appeal process provided herein applies solely to decisions of HCD made pursuant to this NOFA. Applicants may submit to HCD by the deadline a written appeal which states all relevant facts, arguments, and evidence upon which the appeal is based. The applicant must provide a detailed reference to the area or areas of the application that provide clarification and substantiation for the basis for appeal. No new or additional information will be considered if this information will result in a competitive advantage to the applicant. Once the written appeal is submitted to HCD, no further information or materials will be accepted or considered thereafter. Appeals are to be submitted to HCD at dr-mhp@hcd.ca.gov according to the deadline set forth in the HCD review letters. Appeals must be received by HCD no later than 5 business days from the date of HCD's threshold review letter or initial point score letter, as applicable, representing HCD's decision made in response to the application. I'm going to go over some other key requirements of the NOFA. With respect to duplication of benefits, we covered this earlier, but duplication of benefits occurs when a program beneficiary receives disaster assistance from multiple sources for the same recovery purpose, and the total assistance received for that purpose is more than the total need. So it's really any benefit that's available to a person or entity for the same recovery purpose, including cash or other resources, including grants, FEMA assistance, SBA loans, other local, state, or federal program funds, and private or nonprofit organization funds. All activities funded with CDBG-DR dollars must undergo a duplication of benefit review prior to project award and a DOB certification prior to project closeout. Project application must document all funds obtained from any source from the date of the disaster until the date of the application. HCD also reserves the right to perform additional duplication of benefit checks throughout the course of the project's period of performance to ensure there's no duplicative assistance to the project throughout the course of the project. To address any potential duplication of benefits, the standard agreement will include provisions requiring repayment of any assistance later received for the same purpose as the CDBG-DR funds. With respect to the State of California Preservation Notice Law, all applicants, sponsors, co-sponsors, owners, and special purpose entities where applicable must at all times comply with and not be in violation of California's Preservation Notice Law under Government Code Section 65863.10, 11, and 13. With respect to Uniform Relocation Assistance, or the Uniform URA, all projects must comply with federal URA and state and location relocation assistance rules and regulations. If a project results in displacement of persons, businesses, or farm operations, sponsor applicant shall be solely responsible for providing relocation assistance. Before standard agreements from a DR-MHP award can be executed, sponsor must have either A department approved relocation plan, or a department issued certification regarding non-application of relocation benefits and an indemnification agreement which has been duly executed and approved by the department. At this time, I want to thank all participants for attending today's presentation and remind participants that for further questions during the NOFA process, you must reach out to program staff via the email inbox at dr-mhp@hcd.ca.gov. I'd also remind participants that in response to the questions posed in the Q&A box during today's webinar, as well as any questions received from applicants at drmhp@hcd.ca.gov, we will be publishing a frequently asked questions periodically on our website. So please check back on the webpage where the NOFA is located for publication of our frequently asked questions.
Thank you, Clint and Lori, for that lovely presentation. And so I have been responding to some of the Q&A questions in the chat. So I will leave the webinar open a little bit longer for any additional questions that may come in, and give everyone who doesn't have any further questions may feel free to take your leave. And I thank you for your time and attention today, and look forward to seeing your potential applications here in the near future.